Cox Fiber powers one of the most connected stadiums in the world.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. How are you today?
Busy.
Yeah.
And I got to fly out of here after broadcast today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so as I've mentioned before, I joined a service organization outside of church just to kind of expand my connections in
sure.
town.
Yep.
So part of a service organization called Rotary.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said before, I would only join if their values lined up with our church values. Like I wouldn't, but they're clearly
Right.
committed to the same things we are on the secular side of things.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and oftentimes you meet in Thursday mornings, like bright and early.
yes, and so I was there this morning for our regular meeting at 7 a.m. But once a year, this Rotary Club does a soccer tournament for the Valley, and it's kind of like an all-star high school soccer tournament,
Really? Okay.
boys and girls. And normally it's in December, and it fell on that Wednesday in Advent when the shootings at UNLV happened.
Oh,
And so it was supposed, and it happens at the UNLV soccer field, but all activities were shut
Yeah,
down, of
right.
course, and obviously. And this was the only date that seemed to work that we could actually reschedule this soccer tournament.
okay.
So I am not a referee. I don't get to be on the field.
Okay.
I get to sit at a table and collect money for people coming in to see the game. That's all I'm doing. That's my little contribution.
That's your
to this.
contribution
Yep.
to this place.
So,
Okay.
but I said I'd help out, but it begins at 4:00, and I said, well, I might not get there right at 4. But so as soon as broadcast's over,
You'll duck out.
I gotta
And,
leave church, and I gotta go do
have a little service opportunity.
a little service opportunity.
Yeah, sure.
And as it turns out, service is good for the soul,
It is.
right?
It is.
In small ways and in various ways, right? So I'm going to go do that today. And then after that, then I'll head home for the day.
Okay.
So
Sounds good.
So that's what's going on. So I did also see this really fascinating story about a bear,
A bear, huh?
an Asiatic black bear.
My goodness, I'm excited for this.
I mean, you told a cat story about Vic. Was it Vic the cat or
Vic the cat.
Vic the cat
over Advent.
Yes.
I told the story about Vic the cat.
in Alaska?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to top it. I'm just trying to add an animal story into the mix.
Well, and I mean, if you were at Bible study last night, which the two of us were.
Yeah, right. I
we,
saw you there. Yeah.
we talked about
Lions.
lions and bears with no tigers yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Maybe
not yet.
next week.
The Lions of Orthodoxy.
Yes.
That was last night. We're
Yes.
not going there.
Yes.
So in the Ukraine, there, as we know, there's a war going on
Yeah.
between Russia and Ukraine, and the front lines have gone back and forth, as we know, and it's war, so it's terrible. In a small village, there was a small zoo that was under Russian occupation for about 5 months.
Okay.
And then as they pulled back, as the Ukrainian forces moved forward, there was shelling, and some of the zoo had gotten shelled. And when they came in, they actually dug out and found a Asiatic black bear that was not seriously injured, but injured nonetheless in this shelling. And they put this huge bear on a stretcher and got him out of the, in quotes, the war zone, got him veterinary help. They sent him to Belgium
Wow.
and then monitored him, because what they said is bears can also have stress-related difficulties, not unlike human beings with post-traumatic stress disorder. That
Okay.
bears can also have stress-induced health complications. So physically the bear was fine, but they were monitoring this bear to see if he was having any stress-related, and I don't know what those look like in a bear, but I'm sure veterinarians do, right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
And as it turns out, the bear was not traumatized by this ordeal of having his enclosure shelled and blown up. And so then the next plan was a zoo in Scotland said, we'll take the bear. And so just 2 days ago, this bear found a new home at a zoo in Scotland.
How about that?
And I was like,
Quite the journey.
it's quite the journey. And when you think about feel-good stories, to me, it's like you don't necessarily associate a bear with a feel-good story, right? At least I don't. But in the midst of this, what do we see but caring human beings
Yeah, there are so many
who step
reasons where that you could see where that bear could have easily just been dispatched, and
or
yes.
discarded?
I mean,
Yeah.
or just like we don't have the capacity to care
to do with that when
about
we
a
have so
bear
much
right
other
now.
things going on.
Right.
And the care and the concern for the bear to get him off of the place where it was war torn, his home, then to Belgium, then to a permanent zoo in Scotland.
Yeah, that does show something about human beings that
That's right.
that caring for not just our own people who are on our side and who
Right.
are like us,
Yep.
but to care about the broader
Right.
creation.
Exactly. So I like this story because I know that there are times in our lives when we feel shell shocked by something.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be a war, just we're in a place where we're like, and to hear about people coming around somebody in distress, and in this case it was something in distress, you go, that's a model for what the church should be.
Mm-hmm.
Is that when folks are struggling, we come around them because they're not strong enough to care for themselves emotionally or spiritually or whatever, and then we come in and we support that. Now, in a moment like that, if you're in a place like that, I received a gift today that reminds us what to do when we're feeling a little helpless. And this morning, a member came into my office and gave me some encouragement in a little objet dart. And
Oh, yeah?
so I wanted to share it today. So yes, on this side, it just looks like a block of wood.
That's what it looks like.
Yep, just a block of wood. But when you turn it around, it has been imprinted with the words, "Set your mind on things above." And I just thought that was a really perfect thing to say, yeah, we got to set our minds on
Yes.
things above. Because it's also very easy to magnify the wrong things.
Yes.
And become a vortex of self-centeredness.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be woe is me, or that can be life revolves around me and what I want. And that becomes a black hole. And the reminder for us as Christians is, set your mind on things above, which begs the question, like, what if I'm not setting my mind on things above, what am I setting it on? And it really becomes down to a polar choice, binary choice of God's will or my will,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so I love this reminder that just showed up unannounced today. A gift.
It's that constant reminder, because I think
Right.
we can come to worship every week. We can go to seminary, become pastors, but it takes that constant reminder of, am I carrying the small stuff along with me? Am I, trying to climb up on top of the molehill instead of the mountain? Going back to that.
sermon series, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's that daily reminder. We have to do that.
That's right. That's right. And to see that wait a minute, you went to seminary?
I did. I
didn't. Wow, you got more credentials than I got. I just mailed in for something.
Just mailed in, and then look
That's
what
all
they
it
send
is.
you.
That's
Yeah.
right, exactly. Is this understanding of what are we focused on, and is it the things that are less important or the most important thing? And so today, with the song, is a reminder to keep our minds set on things above.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's take a listen to that, and we'll talk a little bit more about this very theme when we come back.
In the morning when I rise, in the morning when I rise, in the morning when I rise, give me Jesus. Dark midnight was my cry. Dark midnight was my cry. Dark midnight was my cry. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. You may have all the world, but give me Jesus. Just about the break of day, just about the break of day, just about the break of day, give me Jesus. Oh, when I come to die, oh, when I come to die, oh, when I come to die, give me Jesus, give me Jesus, give me Jesus. You may have all the world, but give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. You may have all the world, but give me Jesus.
So give me Jesus.
Give me Jesus.
And this is a hymn that I didn't grow up with, but I've known it for 30 plus years. And it is a American spiritual, and its history is fascinating. The earliest version of this hymn was published in 1845.
Okay.
I mean, I know
Wow.
we have sung hymns that go back to St. Francis of Assisi, but when
Yeah.
you think of an American hymn, and you're dating back to 1845,
Yeah, right.
that is an early American hymn
It
in a
is.
lot of ways.
Yeah,
And especially from the genre of spirituals, which is different than kind of European hymns in a lot of ways. And even there's American hymn writers that write in the European style. So this is also a uniquely American genre of music in terms of hymns, being a spiritual. Reverend Jacob Knapp was the one who made sure, or is attributed to, and he was a Baptist minister from New York, 1849, so a few years later, a version of it showed up in the Methodist hymnal, and then mid-19th century, keep moving forward, it was sung often at camps and meetings and also showed up in hymnals. But clearly being a spiritual, that also tells us that it predominantly came out of and was sung in, just to be very honest about it, black churches, right? And in 1873, so we're now about 30 years later, the Fisk Jubilee Singers published a version of this song, 1873, that resembles the version you just heard. So it found its, I wouldn't say its final form, but the current form, because you don't want to shut off that creativity, in 1873. And this is the version that you just heard. And many people have sung it, even a version of this song, Fanny Crosby, prolific hymn writer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a powerful one, and it resonated with so many people
Right.
going back for quite a while. Then.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But it is based on a passage from Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, verse 26. And this is that, you'll know it when I read it to you. What good will it be for a person if they gain the whole world, yet forfeits their soul? Or what can a person give in exchange for their soul? Words of Jesus. And, and that's that binary choice we were just talking about. My will, my way, Frank Sinatra, I did it my way,
Sure.
or God's way. And I think that's, you think about, okay, and Jesus just point blank, asked the question, so you gain the whole world, good for you. You still die in the end. I mean, to be as blunt as it is,
Yeah.
You've accomplished so much. And that's the thing, and I've joked about this, but you'll never see a U-Haul attached to a hearse.
You don't.
You'll never see somebody on their deathbed saying, I wish I had bought one more stock.
Yeah.
Nobody on their deathbed says, I wish I had gotten one more degree or one more sports car or toy.
Yeah.
That's not what people say in their final moments.
Yeah.
People say things like, I wish I would have spent more time on the most important things, or somebody who lived a good life is ready to go because they've done everything they can. They've loved their family, loved the people around
Absolutely.
them. They've been faithful, and they're okay to go, right?
Those are, all of that. I mean, that's a powerful time. But to see people like that who have
are at
that,
peace.
who have
At
that
peace.
peace and that faith,
Right.
I think
Exactly.
It's pretty powerful.
I think to myself, when you say, the song or the hymn, Give Me Jesus, there also is the worldly version of that of give me money, give me power, give me control,
We can chase after all those
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
yeah, which could be just generalized to, I want to own the sandbox, that, give me the sandbox. I want all of it, and so there's a lot of allure in what we think we can control, right? And when it comes down to it, we have control of very little, and that is an illusion in and of itself.
But it's amazing how much we can live our lives as if we can control it all.
Right.
And every little thing, like it revolves around us. And
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
The warming up exercise for people singing in the old days. Me, 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 me.
Sure.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what life is about, right? And I've talked about this, but when you think about it, no matter how much you want to manipulate, you still cannot control the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions of another person. You can't. You may try, but you can't control the thoughts, feelings, or actions. And then when it comes to yourself, you can't even control your own thoughts because your brain does what your brain's going to do. You can divert and say, well, I shouldn't be thinking about that, or change the subject, but you can't control the thoughts that pop into your head. You cannot even control your own feelings. Feelings come up. The only thing you truly have control of in this life are your actions. You may have a thought that even causes an emotion, and if you're self-aware enough and it's negative, you say, well, I'm not going to act on that. You have control of those actions. If you have impulsive nature, then your thought and feeling will turn into action, right? And so in life, really the only thing we have any sort of control over is how we respond to things. And that is it. And the thing that will help us in that is more of Jesus. Give me Jesus, less of me. Or, like when John the Baptist he was arrested, and John the Baptist was the forerunner, the prophet, foretelling the coming of a Messiah. And he ends up upsetting the powers that be, namely Herod, which is the son of the other Herod.
Yeah.
And he's under arrest because he was like a bull in a china shop. That's what prophets do. And he sent some of his disciples because he couldn't go himself. He's like, go ask Jesus, are you the one we're waiting for, or should we keep looking?
Yeah. It was harder for him to see, after he'd been arrested.
Yeah.
At Jesus' baptism, it seems pretty clear that,
Yeah.
he's pointing to Jesus, but it's...
And Jesus gives an answer. But what I really appreciate about John the Baptist, at least as it's attributed in the Gospels, is there's a point in there where he says, Jesus must increase and I must decrease, right?
Yeah.
And I love that for myself because it really is that that thing that we all fight, at least I know I do, is, there needs to be more Jesus in me and sometimes less of me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean my personality, but like the things that distract me. I need more. Give me Jesus, less of me.
Well, it's counterintuitive because the whole perspective, what the Bible teaches is that when we do turn to Jesus, we actually get more freedom. We actually become more free.
Right.
And
yet people don't see that.
Who God
Right.
created us to be.
That's right.
But yeah, we lose sight of that. We think
Yeah.
we've got to hold on to something that revolves around us.
For dear life.
Yeah.
For dear life. And it is a struggle for everybody on that path, is to really be asking the question, is this of Jesus? Is this reflective of Jesus? Or is this a reflection of, my will be done as opposed to thy will be done, right? And so that's why I also like this hymn, is it's a mantra for me of give me Jesus, because it also means that I got to let go of the other things I'm holding on to. If I'm calling out give me Jesus, by that nature, it means I also have to let go of other things. Yeah. At least from my understanding. Now, there's a really interesting verse that's a little difficult in Galatians. Now, Paul writes Galatians, and they're struggling with understanding the gospel, the good news of Jesus' love, that you don't have to do anything, that it is a gift of grace. They struggle with this.
Well, it appears there were other teachers who were coming around too, telling them, no, you actually do have to
Do
prove
these
yourself.
things, right.
Yeah.
And by the time we get to the 5th chapter, he gets to this place where it's a really, I'm not saying uncomfortable, but it's a difficult passage because of the imagery he uses. But I think it's worthwhile in this discussion we're having.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Galatians chapter 5, 24 to 25. Those who belong to Christ have crucified the sinful nature with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep step with the Spirit.
So hard stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, that's not easy. And I want to go backwards. I want to start with, since we live by the Spirit, let's keep in step with the Spirit. I think often what it comes down to is we say we're in step with the Spirit, verbally. So we talk the talk, but we don't necessarily walk the walk, right? Especially around when we're surrounded by other Christians, we might be like, go Jesus, and yes to all that stuff, but privately, we're still saying, "Give me me," not "Give me Jesus," right?
Yeah.
And so when he says, "Since we live by the Spirit, let's keep in step with the Spirit," he's like, if you're gonna talk the talk, let's walk the walk. Okay. Now we're gonna back up to that other part of that verse, where he's like, "Well, if you claim to want Jesus in your life, and you're a person of faith, part of that is the hard work of killing some of that selfish nature within you." I mean, he uses the word crucify, but he's like, you got to kill it. And you got to kill it by replacing it. More Jesus, less me. And he says, you have crucified the sinful nature with its passions and desires. He's like, if you're going to actually walk the walk, you have to kill this thing, the sinful self, which is all over the New Testament, right? And I would say that it's like a bad horror movie. You ever seen a bad horror movie?
I try to avoid them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Especially with young boys in the house. Right? But inevitably, in a bad horror movie, you think you're at the end of the movie when the good guy or good woman finally kills the monster.
The monster is gone.
But inevitably, in any bad horror movie, there's a one more gotcha moment. And you think the monster is dead, and then it rears up one last time.
Sure it does. Yes.
Before then you finally put it down, right? Like, there's always that, like in that, I don't want to even talk about the movie Fatal Attraction, but that happened in the movie Fatal Attraction, where you thought that the person was gone, and then they came back one more time, and you're like,
Goodness
made
gracious.
me
Too
jump
scary for me.
in the movie theater.
Yeah.
Glenn Close, holy moly.
Holy moly.
But it's like that, is you think, okay, I've conquered this thing,
Yeah.
and then it jumps back.
It jumps right back at you.
Right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
what happens is, in human nature, is we're often more concerned about the other person's monster than our own monster.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's true.
Right?
Sure.
And so when he says crucify the sinful nature with its passions and desires, what he's saying is like, man, we got to put an end to and work towards in our discipleship walk to be able to be self-aware enough to say, is this thing of Jesus, or is this a thing of me? Right?
Yeah.
And so crucify is a very harsh word, because we're talking about nails and all sorts of things.
Certainly, but it would have been a harsh, probably even a harsher word for the people to hear back then.
Who saw those
who
things.
saw those kinds
things,
of
right?
things. So he was, and Paul was rather dramatic and really laying it on
Yeah, right.
pretty harshly for some of those
wanted them to
Galatians.
get
yeah,
the-
you want to
get the point.
get the point.
But
Picture this.
But I think it's well illustrated of saying, oh my gosh, if I'm going to say that I live by the Spirit, I should keep step with the Spirit, which might mean I need to deal with some of my junk, some of my selfishness, right? So that when I do things, I'm doing it from a place of God's will and not my own will. And so I really appreciate that, as hard as that is. And and then he follows this up not in Galatians but in Philippians. Paul wrote so many, 2/3 of the New Testament, not because they were assembling a book, but because people saved those letters along with the gospel stories, right? And in Philippians chapter 2 is this encouragement that's a much softer encouragement than what you heard in Galatians, but it really falls into that same territory. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Oh. It's about me, right? Vain conceit. It's about me and what I want. But in humility, consider others better than yourselves. And that's a tough road for some folks.
Yeah.
That some folks really need a pecking order to feel good about themselves, to know, at least the way they think, there's somebody beneath them, right?
I think that's true. Unfortunately, that's kind of
It's the
built
world.
in, kind of a default human feature.
Right.
Is
I'm
yeah,
better,
who's
I'm
below
sma-
me?
Yeah, I'm better, I'm
and
smarter,
we're looking at
I'm-
we're trying to build an order there.
Yeah.
and
And
yeah.
that's a human construct, right? And it's something that we do looking,
Hmm.
we evaluate another person, and then I'm not saying we all do it in the sense that we live that way, but it's a human construct to size people up and then put them in a ranking in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Paul's like, selfish ambition, vain conceit, yeah, not a thing in the Christian walk. He said, but in humility, consider others better than yourselves. And I really like that. And what I try to understand is you try to, at least in my mind, is try to treat people as equals, not pecking order, right? Treat everybody like they're a brother or sister. Then all of a sudden, you're well on your way. Each of you should not look only to your own interests, but to the interests of others. Which, by the way, is, we go back to Sunday, and when I was talking about God's understanding of justice, isn't just what's good for me, but what's good for the whole, right? There's a concern about when we live in community, we're wired for community. What's good not just for the majority or a segment, but what's good for all. And in that, and while we're doing that, according to Philippians, and Paul's writing is like, hey, how we treat people matters. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yep.
And I don't remember any place in Scripture where Jesus was looking down on. He criticized Pharisee behavior, but never did he look down on folks.
No, he would criticize the behavior, but yeah, he was still going and eating meals at the Pharisees' home.
At the Pharisees'
And
home when he was invited.
sitting alongside.
And even Nicodemus, who was in the Sanhedrin, in other words, the Jewish Council of 70, which is about as high as you get, Nicodemus invited him over, and he went, and Jesus spent time with him, even though he was afraid to be seen with Jesus, because the nuance to that in John chapter 3 is Nicodemus invited him over. He said, well, come over after dark.
No, he was concerned about appearances and
Appearances.
whose pecking order was. Yeah, he was all concerned about that.
And yet Jesus, in spite of that, goes and helps him expand his mind about the kingdom of God and what does it mean to be a part of the kingdom of God. So with that, it's Thursday.
Yes, it is.
So it means we're getting ready for the weekend. And we continue on that journey of talking about change in our life. We've talked about uninvited change. We've talked about societal change. And this week, we jump into another aspect of change.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. And so I think all of that idea of change really fits our discussion today, too. But, the question is, give me Jesus or give me something else, or keep your mind set on things above, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So with that, we're going to bid you adieu. We hope you have a good rest of your day. And in a little bit, I got to go be at a soccer tournament.
Yes, you do.
So with that, we love you. Take care. God bless. And believe it or not, we're going to close with Dr. Philip Fortenberry.